Fixed idea. The 2nd of June 1938, Thursday. 8:30. Breakfast was on schedule. The dining room on the first floor was small, but bright, because of several windows. That's probably why I like to have breakfast there. The breakfast itself was, of course, disgusting, but the rays of the morning sun were beautiful. The window in my room looked right into a dull brick wall, so I bravely recovered this territory for myself from the other guys. No one had sat at that table since then. A line of kids slowly moved from the small sink to the window where Miss Blair was. She smiled good-naturedly and served food. So, I took my tray, greeted a more sensible person than Mrs. Cole, and was already turning towards the usual way when I saw that the new girl took my place. What the hell? For a split second, I was in doubt whether to drive her out or just sit next to her. The answer in my head came immediately: no, this is my place, let her look for another one. I walked confidently to the table, determined to come into conflict if the situation called for it.
Hi, Tom.
Irene spoke first. She didn't sound happy, but she didn't sound aggressive either.
Place is free. Sit down.
Actually, it's my place.
I said calmly, drilling a hole in her forehead with my eyes. Her forehead was the only place on her face that was visible to me, everything else was hidden behind the large iron mug, like a knight's visor, from which she sipped her tea. I sat opposite. Irene put the mug on the table and continued.
You can sit with me.
After a moment's silence, she stuck an aluminum spoon into the porridge, and then added,
If you don't ask stupid questions, of course.
I wasn't going to talk to you.
I said coldly. That was my silent try to send her to hell gently, without attracting attention. Then I defiantly started my breakfast. Who the hell are you? To give you any special attention? A wave of mild irritation went through my body. I hope she was smart enough to keep her mouth shut, or one more word and we'd have a fight. I didn't win that place by the window for that silly girl to come and take it for nothing, like it had always been hers. Forget it. No way.
Let's just eat breakfast.
Irene spat out sharply and coldly, putting the mug on the table, looking at me for the first time. I could finally see her face, and it was obvious to me that her whole appearance was haggard. It seemed that she had not slept for a couple of days. Her dead, pale face was framed by black hair, which made her look even gaunt. Dull, emerald eyes, shaded by swelling and bruises, looked straight into mine. She didn't blink once, waiting for my answer. For a split second it seemed that she zoned out. I suddenly realized that the pause had dragged on a bit, and my whole attitude of scolding had been replaced by staring at the little things. I feigned as surprised a look as I could. My reaction was belated, but Irene didn't seem actively thinking person either, at least for now. As if awakening from a short trance, she put her spoon into the tasteless lumpy porridge and said softly,
I'll sit here, Tom. I don't annoy you with silly questions, and you don't annoy me.
I nodded silently, because there was a point in her words, and it was absolutely unwise to attract Mrs. Cole's attention. Although the desire to hit with a spoon exactly in the center of Irene's forehead was still difficult to suppress. But I was still well aware that no one had forgotten the recent situation with Billy. Then there was a complete immersion in the morning meal, as if it were something fascinating, as long as my eyes didn't slip inadvertently to the new girl. She ate the tasteless porridge faster than I did, got up from the table, and headed away. My gaze immediately clung to the back of the receding silhouette, like a small piece of iron that clung to the magnet, treacherously slipping out of my hands over and over again. Only when Irene left the common dining room, hiding somewhere in the orphanage corridors, I indifferently continued to have breakfast. Every day was boring, the same. The kids played on the playground outside the orphanage, according to the schedule. According to the schedule, there were general, but rare lessons. According to the schedule, we had lunch and dinner. All those days blended into one. But I felt every day that something else was waiting for me. I couldn't figure out what it was yet, but the fact that I was here was clearly a mistake. My father must be looking for me. The warm summer wind blew on my face and mussed the locks of my hair. I blew on the annoying curl that stabbed me right in the eye, and looked around the playground of the orphanage with an appraising glance. It seemed as if a tumbleweed was about to sweep from the cast iron gates to the walls of the building. I was bored, though the other kids, like monkeys with a cheeky squeal, swarmed around the same benches every walk, one sandbox, in fact, it was just a pile of sand, and two old, rusty swings, as if they were there for the first time. My ears picked out a girl's chuckle from the general flow of noise. Well, of course, this is something new. Something new that, in the permanent drabness of orphanage life, was wildly irritating, but so appealing at the same time. It stirred my interest barely perceptibly, and thereby made me feel a subtle dislike. Irene sat on her haunches by the bench, seemingly oblivious to the fact that her dress was light. My eyes involuntarily rolled up, and my tongue clicked, as if it was living its own life. Mrs. Cole will be displeased with such carelessness, but Irene either did not know about it, or she was so carried away by the conversation. But with whom? There's no one there. Strange girl. Very strange. I slowly walked over to the swing, which was on the opposite side of the playground from the bench, and sat down on a wooden gray plank. The creak of the rusty chain echoed through the yard, lost in the hum of children's cries and laughter. I pressed my feet to the ground, not wanting to swing. Firstly, this activity seemed kind of primitive to me, and secondly, I did not want to die because of the old swing at all. The possibility that it might fall off at any moment always seemed very, very high to me. My every movement was calm and even phlegmatic, which could not be said about the searching gaze that quickly rushed to the bench. There was definitely nobody there. I listened closely, desperately clinging to the echoes of the phrases.
Where did you come from?
Irene chirped friendly.
Really?
Red-haired Bella with a smile on her face approached in the direction of Irene. Bella was a good girl, the most ordinary. She never caused any conflicts, no one offended her. Apparently, she decided to make friends with the new girl. Running up to the fragile silhouette sitting on the ground, she poked her finger somewhere in the Irene's shoulder blade and laughed loudly. Irene twitched, but she quickly got over the body reaction. It took me a split second to realize that Irene was analyzing Bella exactly the same way she had analyzed me yesterday. Apparently not recognizing any danger, she smiled in a friendly way, and then got up from the ground and shook off the light hem of her dress. Her black sandals and snow-white socks were covered with dust. After a little hesitation, she waved her hand. There you go. She would get a punishment from Mrs. Cole tonight for such untidiness. She would wash her white socks all night and her desire to crawl on the muddy ground would be gone for all eternity. Silly girl. The girls disappeared behind the main entrance of the orphanage. I continued to wonder what could be so interesting about an ordinary gray bench. At a brisk pace, I headed toward where Irene had been squatting a few minutes before. The anticipation of something truly interesting made me smile faintly. How disappointed I was to find that there was nothing unusual there. I wanted to grab the new girl by a lock of hair and pull with all my strength for the deceived expectations, so that she screamed in pain and cried, begging to let go. That's who should be sent to an asylum, Mrs. Cole, definitely not me. At least I don't talk to benches. I sighed disappointedly, and was about to leave when my eyes caught something behind the bench. I immediately stepped closer and froze in a daze. It couldn't be. A dark tangle lay in the grass, shimmering in the sun. It was a snake with a rhombic pattern on its greenish back. My heart completely refused to listen to the cold mind. It dispersed the blood, echoing in my temples.
Was she talking to you?
I instantly leaned toward the snake basking in the warm rays.
Yes.
It hissed back. The scaly rings began to move slowly, shimmering in the sun.
Does she understand you the way I do?
Yes, she does.
This situation was the trigger, so I spent the next 2 weeks constantly watching the new girl. It was like some kind of mania, an obsession. Was it because there were no more special classes at Wool's orphanage, and the children were left to themselves? Who knows? In fact, I had often gone out alone to walk around London before, trying to mix up the endless drab routine with a little adventure. Now all my thoughts revolved around that girl who had come from nowhere. She was polite and well-mannered, but she did not get close to anyone and kept to herself. I also sat next to her in the dining room, but we didn't talk. In the rare classes we had, Irene sat in the third row and I in the first, so there was no contact with her there either. When we were scheduled to go for a walk, she sat aloof on the bench, watching everyone thoughtfully and, as usual, dangling her feet that didn't reach the ground. She was watching me, too. I could feel it. I didn't play with anyone on that playground either, of course, but I wasn't going to move closer, at least not yet. Every time we were allowed to walk outside the orphanage, Irene was quickly out of sight, and my curiosity began to get the better of me that at some point I decided to follow her. But nothing unusual happened there either. It turned out that she ran down to the Millennium Bridge, went down the cliff to the water and just sat there alone for hours.